The spring of 1941 produced more warnings than any intelligence apparatus in the history of modern warfare had assembled about a single event, and the man who received them dismissed them all. The warnings came from different directions, through different channels, and with different degrees of specificity, but they converged on the same conclusion with a consistency that should have been impossible to ignore, and that Stalin ignored with a stubbornness that would cost the Soviet Union more than 20 million dead. They came from the British, who had been reading German communications through the Enigma decryption program at Bletchley Park and passed carefully sanitized intelligence to Moscow through diplomatic channels. They came from the Soviet spy network in Japan, where Richard Sorge had penetrated the German embassy in Tokyo and was sending reports of extraordinary precision. Reports that named June as the month and identified the approximate scale of the German force being assembled. They came from Soviet military intelligence officers in Europe, whose agent networks tracked the movement of German divisions toward the Soviet frontier with little room for alternative interpretation. They came from frontier commands themselves, whose reconnaissance reported the buildup with professional certainty. Stalin annotated one intelligence report by labeling its source a German disinformation agent, despite the source's established record of accuracy. He sent a teletype to frontier districts ordering them not to respond to German provocations and not to take defensive measures. German deserters crossed Soviet lines in the final days before June 22 and reported the attack was coming the next morning. They were arrested and in some cases shot. On June 21, the British ambassador issued a final warning. Stalin dismissed it as manipulation. The attack came at 3:45 a.m. on June 22, exactly as predicted, along the entire frontier, with more than 3 million German soldiers, with the full weight of the Luftwaffe. Soviet forces were forward, concentrated, unprotected, and unprepared. The command system had been told not to prepare. This catastrophe, the most expensive intelligence failure in modern history, was not a failure of collection. The warnings were accurate. The failure was in reception. Stalin could not believe them without admitting his strategy was wrong, and his system could not permit self-correction. Hitler's intelligence failures followed a different psychological pattern, but produced comparable disasters. The German intelligence apparatus in 1941 was not incompetent. The Abwehr under Admiral Wilhelm Canaris operated across Europe. Signals intelligence intercepted Allied communications. Foreign Armies East employed professional analysts, but what the system produced was distorted before reaching Hitler, and further distorted when he received it. General Reinhard Gehlen led Foreign Armies East and consistently produced accurate assessments of Soviet strength. He documented Soviet armored growth, manpower reserves, and operational sophistication, but these assessments conflicted with Hitler's plans, so they were filtered. Selective presentation transformed intelligence into confirmation. Raw reports were softened. Uncomfortable implications were removed. Briefings were designed to avoid provoking Hitler. Hitler did not treat intelligence as data. He treated it as a test of loyalty. Information that challenged him was seen as defeatism. Officers who delivered bad news paid professional prices. Others learned the lesson. Colonel Adolf Heusinger observed how briefings evolved into rituals designed to protect Hitler's emotional comfort. Numbers were framed, context was adjusted, some facts were omitted. Everyone understood the rules. The most consequential failure in the West came in 1944. Operation Fortitude convinced Germany that the main invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais. Fake radio traffic, double agents, dummy armies, and it worked. It worked because it confirmed what German intelligence wanted to believe. Calais was logical. Normandy seemed secondary. Disconfirming evidence was dismissed. When landings began on June 6th, Hitler retained personal control of armored reserves. He refused to release them. He believed Calais was still coming. The assessment was wrong. The delay allowed the Allied beachhead to survive. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt had warned against this command system. He was overruled. His prediction proved correct. The V weapons program provided another example. Hitler invested enormous resources in V1 and V2 weapons based on manipulated intelligence. British double agents reported that rockets were overshooting London. They were actually falling short. Germany corrected its aim in the wrong direction. The British had penetrated the German agent network. Canaris's Abwehr suspected compromise, but warnings were softened. Systemic failure was treated as isolated cases. Nothing changed. The Ardennes offensive of December 1944 was planned with flawed assumptions. German intelligence correctly noted weak Allied defenses, but underestimated Allied response speed. By 1944, Patton could pivot entire corps within days. German assessments were based on outdated models. They had not tracked Allied learning. The same mistake made on the Eastern Front was repeated in the West. Hitler died in his bunker in April 1945, surrounded by the consequences of his intelligence failures. Soviet armies from the East, Allied armies from the West, a ruined country. Overestimated strength, underestimated enemies, ignored warnings. The intelligence had been accurate. It had been irrelevant. Because decisions were made by a man who did not use intelligence to understand reality. He used it to test whether reality matched his beliefs. It did not.